Now, this should go without saying, but I think it's worth mentioning it that you won't get anything out of this class without being familiar with the text. If you have your text with you, that's great. But I would encourage you to read through the text a few times before you come to the class, and then you'll get so much more out of it. I am expecting, although this is down to my wife's organization, to be on holiday on the 19th of May. So we'll probably have a break on that week, but more about that later. So that's all my announcements for the moment. But we started off last week in chapter 1, which was a good place to start, but we didn't start at verse 1. And I left it out deliberately, not because I don't like it or think we shouldn't be studying it, but I just felt it would take up so much more time, and I wanted to devote the time to what I did present to you. But anyway, in chapters 1 through 4 is a major section of the First Corinthian letter where Paul is talking about divisions, and 4 chapters he takes. Wasn't 4 chapters in his mind, but 4 chapters now, translation minds, to teach about not only the folly of division, but it's the necessity for all Christians to be united. That's not to say we're all the same, but as Christians, we're of one mind, and particularly one mind concerning Jesus and Him crucified. And of course, we'll go on this evening to talk about the folly of saying, let me set up one group, you have another group, and that's how denominations start, isn't it? And Paul has a great deal to say about the folly of such thinking. But let's go into our text and let's see if I can get my slides to work today. Here in 1 Corinthians verses 1 through 5 is what we'll look at first. So that's 1 Corinthians 1 verses 1 through 5. And when I came to you, brethren, I did not come with superiority. I did not come with superiority of speech or of wisdom, proclaiming to you the testimony of God. For I determined to know nothing among you except Jesus Christ and Him crucified. I was with you in weakness and in fear and in much trembling. And my message and my preaching were not in persuasive words of wisdom, but in demonstration of the Spirit and of power, so that your faith would not rest on the wisdom of men, but on the power of God. And you may recall last week we spoke at some length, well, I spoke at some length on the question of wisdom, and particularly the philosophers who seemed to be in abundance in Paul's day, and how Paul was trying to persuade the Corinthians that these philosophies coming from the minds of men were not to overshadow, first of all, what he had taught them and the faith in Jesus that had produced. But I think it's true to say, and one author in his introduction to this part of 1 Corinthians says that life is an intricate tapestry woven with mystery. And I'm sure that is true. We've all experienced that to some extent. The most complex theories that we can come across, particularly in science, has to offer only serve to illuminate the vastness of the unknown that still lies beyond our grasp. There are some truths that are meant to be felt, not necessarily defined. And what I mean by that is the example of music. I don't know if you're a lover of music, But I find that music has the remarkable ability to stir profound emotions. Yet the reason behind that power remains elusive. Many people have tried to explain it, but no one has come up with an absolute answer as to why music can evoke the emotions within us that it does. But for centuries, humanity has grasped with profound mysteries, mysteries of love and death, mysteries of joy and beauty. And these mysteries seem to illuminate the greatest enigma of them all, the mystery of God. In ancient civilizations, individuals crafted intricate systems to delve into this mystery, often centered around revered deities like Isis or Mithras. They were convinced that by participating in special initiation rites and embracing rigorous disciplines, they could unlock the very heart of the divine mystery, that they could gain transformative insights that would alter the course of their lives forever. And then onto the stage of history come the Jews. And the Jews, or most of them anyway, held the conviction that the one true God had already invited them to partake in his life, to partake in his divine purpose, which of course led them to reject any alternative paths. Yet they grappled with a sense of mystery as they attempted to uncover the truth about why God created the world and what his intentions were for their lives and their future. Within the ancient writings of Israel, both in the Bible and in other texts, many voices sort of resonate with the urgency to explore this truth, seeking to illuminate the workings of God's creation and to reveal how individuals fit into his grand design, which is where Paul steps in at this point. Now, I've outlined what he has to say in the first 5 verses, and you'll find that outline probably doesn't differ a great deal from outlines that you'll find in commentaries and other sources, but it helps us to know where we are in the particular text. Paul seized upon a Jewish tradition and boldly proclaimed that God's past, present, and future had been magnificently unveiled through Jesus the Messiah. Jesus is a crucial key to unlocking the deepest secrets of God. Paul delves deeper into this revelation in his letters, particularly in Colossians chapter 1, verses 26 to chapter 2, verse 3. But here he urges the bewildered Corinthian Christians to recognize that despite the message of the crucified Jesus appearing as foolishness and a scandal to the world, it holds the very essence of life's greatest mysteries. In making this point, especially in verse 7, and throughout his writings, Paul cleverly critiques their culture and philosophy, which often dabbled in pagan mysteries. Yeah, even some Christians in the first century dabbled in pagan mysteries. He's steering them back to a solid Jewish foundation, inviting them to discover divine truth. One reason the mystery of the gospel remains elusive is that in Corinth and many other places, people would never think to seek the answers to life's most essential questions, such as the nature of existence, the universe, God, beauty, love, and death. at a site of execution in a rebellious city of the Middle East. This is particularly why, as Paul points out, the Corinthian Christians were, for the most part, neither wise nor powerful, nor of noble birth. In fact, when he delivered this message to them, Paul himself was filled with fear and trembling, illustrating the impact of the gospel's revelation. Imagine, if you can, standing before a distinguished audience, ready to deliver a speech, yet feeling utterly unprepared. You find yourself fumbling to share a particular experience from a few years ago, one that you know, may sound outrageous, but you truly believe it holds profound significance. As you speak, you scan the audience and catch subtle reactions, a curled lip, a raised eyebrow, fleeting glances exchanged amongst people. You can sense the skepticism in the air. They shake their heads, not just dismissing your message as nonsense, but feeling insulted that you would present them with such a strange tale. Yet, deep down, you know that sometimes the most unexpected stories contain the greatest truths. There was undeniable power in Paul's message. While we may not fully grasp his phrase, demonstration of the Spirit and of power, it suggests that genuine healing miracles may have occurred. But more importantly, Paul transformed hearts and minds and lives without restoring to the usual rhetorical devices. The truth of the gospel carried a strength of its own, and Paul embraced this simplicity, unafraid of appearing foolish. His unwavering conviction demonstrated that the essence of the gospel was compelling enough to effect real change. At the very core of an authentic response to the gospel, of course, lies faith. This concept is not just a peripheral notion. It is central to Paul's understanding of what it truly means to be a Christian. And it's essential to consider the significance of his insights on faith. He asserts that this faith, which he identifies elsewhere as the definitive mark of Christian identity, is enacted through the power of the Spirit working within the gospel. Although he doesn't explicitly define the essence of this faith in this passage, other parts of his writings illuminate and enrich our understanding. Take, for example, Romans 10:9, where he articulates the true Christian faith involves confessing Jesus as Lord and believing in his resurrection by God. This powerful declaration resonates deeply with his summarization of the gospel message embraced by believers, as we'll see in 1 Corinthians 15. Moreover, in Romans 12:3, he underscores that no one can genuinely proclaim Jesus is Lord apart from the dynamic influence of the Holy Spirit. This understanding of faith, grounded in the gospel, is what truly defines and transforms Christian identity. In 1 Corinthians 15, Paul reminds the Corinthians of the core message of the gospel that he and his fellow apostles faithfully proclaimed. He emphasizes not only the significance of Jesus' death, but also the power of his resurrection. Paul further underscores this momentous event by recounting multiple incidents where the risen Jesus appeared to various individuals, including himself. And this prompts a question. How does this testimony align with Paul's assertion that he chose to proclaim nothing but Jesus the Messiah, the crucified one, during his time with them in Corinth? And he doesn't intend to suggest that he spoke solely of Jesus' crucifixion without addressing his resurrection. We shouldn't take that from what Paul says. After all, hundreds of people face crucifixion in Paul's time. What sets Jesus apart was that God raised him from the dead. By placing a strong emphasis on the crucifixion, Paul ensured that his message would not be misconstrued as a mere rhetorical flourish, something compelling in the moment, but quite devoid of any lasting impact. In the ancient world, of course, crucifixion was viewed as so horrific, so degrading, that it was considered taboo to discuss it in polite society. No self-respecting sophists from last week or experts in rhetoric would entertain such a notion. Yet Paul firmly believed, and the faith and lives of the Corinthian Christians attested to this, that the crucifixion held the key to understanding the mystery of life. Which brings us to Paul's discussion about wisdom, particularly God's wisdom. And in verses 6 through 13, Paul says, "Yet we do speak wisdom among those who are mature. A wisdom, however, not of this age, nor of the rulers of this age who are passing away, but we speak God's wisdom in a mystery, the hidden wisdom which God predestined before the ages to our glory. The wisdom which none of the rulers of this age has understood. For if they had understood it, they would not have crucified the Lord of glory. But just as it is written, things which eye has not seen and ears has not heard, and which have not entered the hearts of men, all that God has prepared for those who love him. For to us, God revealed them through the Spirit. For the Spirit searches all things, even the depths of God. For who among men knows the thoughts of a man except the spirit of the man which is in him? Even so, the thoughts of God no one knows except the Spirit of God. Now we have received not the spirit of the world, but the Spirit who is from God, so that we may know the things freely given to us by God. Which things we also speak, not in words taught by human wisdom, but in those taught by the Spirit, combining spiritual thoughts in spiritual words." So an outline for these verses, I can find it. In this passage, a bit longer than our first passage, I think Paul addresses a profound teaching designed exclusively for those who have achieved spiritual maturity. He likens their growth to refining one's taste, to savor the richness of more sophisticated nourishment. While he acknowledges that his gospel may appear as foolishness to the Greeks and a scandal to Jews, he wishes to convey that this is merely the beginning. He possesses a depth of wisdom that is not only profound, but also rich and is multifaceted. However, this treasure is reserved for those who are ready and willing to embrace it, those who have cultivated the spiritual discernment necessary to appreciate its true value. And this is not merely a matter of taking back with one hand what has just been bestowed with the other. Paul is not suggesting that as converts grow in their faith, they will receive the same sort of wisdom that the sophists and philosophers of this world offer. Far from it, indeed. The wisdom he refers to is not of this present age. It belongs to the age to come. Now, attempting to convey this wisdom to those who do not belong to this new reality in Christ is like, excuse the example, but it's like trying to describe a sunrise to someone who's never been able to see. Only those who have embraced the resurrection of the Son of God can begin to grasp the depth of this wisdom. For everyone else, it remains as bewildering as the gospel itself. Paul, at this point, reminds the Corinthians of the core message of the gospel that he and his fellow apostles faithfully proclaimed. He emphasizes not only the significance of Jesus' death, but as we said, also the power of his resurrection. Paul further underscores this momentous event by recounting multiple incidences where the risen Jesus appeared to various individuals, including himself. This prompts a question. How does this testimony align with Paul's assertion that he chose to proclaim nothing but Jesus the Messiah, the crucified one, during his time with him? At the heart of Paul's problem he's encountering in Corinth, as he does in other places, is that people, including Christians, and perhaps particularly Christians, continue to misunderstand the whole notion of godly wisdom. As one writer says, they persist in playing a familiar tune in an outdated key, while the notes of the gospel and the fresh wisdom it offers simply cannot resonate within their framework. And in this context, Paul introduces a crucial theme that will echo through. I'm sorry, my notes keep jumping on the screen. Just bear with me a moment. Okay, well, Paul underscores this critical distinction that he will revisit throughout the letter. This distinction is at the heart of what he longs the Corinthians to understand. History can be divided into two epochs. The first is the present age, marked by human rebellion, sin, despair, and death. But the second epoch is the age to come, a glorious time when the one true God will reign supreme, putting an end to all forces that oppose him. Now, the powerful truth is this: the age to come has already begun to infiltrate the present age through Jesus the Messiah. His death, his resurrection, represent a monumental shift in the narrative of history, heralding a transition from the minor key, to go back to music again, from the minor key of despair to the triumphant major key of hope and redemption. And you know, the current age and its rulers profoundly misunderstand this wisdom. They persist in playing a familiar tune in an outdated key. And here Paul introduces a crucial theme that will echo throughout the letter, serving as an essential backdrop, as it were, for much of what is to come. He identifies the rulers of this age as the very governments wielding power in the world, asserting that they are responsible for the crucifixion of the Lord of glory. These political authorities, along with their local counterparts, conspired to put Jesus on the cross. And during this particular time, Rome, under the authority of the Emperor Tiberius, exerted its control through the local governor Pontius Pilate. Meanwhile, the Jewish leaders, including the chief priests and Herod Antipas, the figure known as the King of the Jews, played their part by managing to keep the local populace aligned with Rome's decisions. This coalition exemplifies the depths of political manipulation and moral blindness that led to such a momentous tragedy. But you know, throughout history, we see the extraordinary irony that the highest religion and the most powerful government could unite to execute the Lord of glory, something Paul undoubtedly understood. The Bible reveals that God's design for human society is for it to be governed by wise and just authorities. Yet, the very nature of power means that all governments are susceptible to corruption, arrogance, self-interest, often prioritizing their own agendas over true justice, wisdom, and truth. This tragic reality unfolded dramatically at Jesus' crucifixion. The ruling authorities, blinded by their own ambition, thought they were merely eliminating yet another troublemaker, an attitude that had persisted through the ages amongst ruthless empires. However, had they truly grasped the magnitude of their actions, they would never have proceeded with such a grave error. And the reason is not simply that they would have shown Jesus the respect he deserved. Rather, they would have recognized that in condemning him, they were in fact sealing their own demise. This tragic misunderstanding, it does serve as a powerful reminder of the profound consequences that arise when power ignores justice and truth. In Colossians 2:15, Paul employs another irony to depict the cross of Jesus as the defining moment when the principalities and powers are humiliated, paraded as a vanquished mob behind the chariot of a triumphant general. In 1 Corinthians 15:23-28, he articulates a truth. Jesus will secure the ultimate victory over every rule, power, and authority on the glorious day of his revelation as King. Now, these two moments are intricately linked. The victory achieved on the cross will be fully realized in Jesus' final manifestation. Paul asserts that death, the last enemy to be conquered, renders the rulers of this world absolutely and utterly powerless. And as every tyrant knows, it is through the spectre of death that power is so often maintained. But with Christ's resurrection, that threat is ultimately defeated, ushering in a new era of hope and authority. And what Paul is doing in these verses is drawing attention to the profound ignorance of today's world rulers, illustrating that their power is ultimately destined for failure. He urges Christians, he urges Christians to embrace their identity as citizens of God's sovereign reign. In doing so, he presents an uplifting truth. God has prepared extraordinary blessings for those who love him, a concept deeply rooted in the Old Testament tradition that signifies his faithful people. Although the quotation he cites is not from the Old Testament itself, it derives from a lost ancient text, Jewish text, known to some in the early church. Paul reveals that wisdom transcends mere intellectual knowledge or the elegance of abstract theories. It blooms like a vibrant garden or cascades like a mighty river. But it nourishes the human spirit on levels we cannot yet fathom. This is the magnificent promise that God holds for those who truly love him. But you may be asking, how do we know? Because God, according to Paul in this passage, has given us his Spirit. This is another major theme of the letter introduced here for the first time. Paul relishes the fact that the Spirit who is poured out upon believers, bringing them to faith and opening their hearts and minds to the wisdom of the age to come, is God's own Spirit, not some lesser being. The Spirit within a person, the deep innermost life where thought, feeling, memory, and imagination all meet. knows best what the person is really all about. Even so, Paul declares, God's Spirit is like that with God, and this Spirit is given to all God's people in the Messiah. This, quite frankly, is an astonishing claim. It clearly doesn't mean that Christians automatically know everything about God, or why would Paul bother to write letters? What would we do on a Monday evening if that were the case? It means that they have open access to God's mind. Or, as he says in verse 16, to the mind of the Messiah. But to explore this, they must themselves be mature. So, verse 6. They must themselves be, in some important sense, which we'll now go on to explain, they must be spiritual. Actually, this tight, packed, and challenging passage has many, many lessons for us. But perhaps the most important is for Christians who have forgotten, or perhaps never known, two truths. The first is that there is a wealth of knowledge and life-enhancing understanding waiting for us to explore. Christianity is not simply a set of beliefs and a rule book for life, such as anyone could master in a weekend, perhaps. It is as many-sided as the world itself, full of beauty, mystery, full of power, and as terrifying at times, and as wonderful as God himself. There is always much, much more to learn, to relish and to delight in. The second is that the Christian message from the very beginning challenged the world of power, including social and political power, with the message of God's superior kingdom unveiled in Jesus' death, unveiled in Jesus' resurrection. Paul doesn't want the Corinthians to imagine that he is talking simply about a religious experience that won't have anything to do with the real life of politics and government. He wouldn't want us to imagine that either. So, my friends, let me finish by suggesting that we don't settle for a gospel which allows the world's power games to proceed without challenge. For we are not only the bearers of truth, the Messiah's truth, we are the bearers of God's Spirit in a world that is lost, a world that is confused, a world that is ignorant, and waiting for God to reveal his truths through his people.